The stranger at the bench was a rainy morning in San Francisco. The city streets were quieter than usual, muffled by the thick clouds above. Near Union Square, a small crowd passed by a wooden bench where a woman sat, wrapped in layers of tattered clothes. Her face was tired, her hands trembling slightly from the cold. She looked down, clutching a faded photograph of a young man in uniform. No one stopped. Not a single person looked at her. She had become invisible, just part of the background. But then something unusual happened. A man in a dark hoodie paused in front of her. He didn't speak at first. He just looked at her with curious eyes. After a moment, he sat beside her without saying a word. The woman glanced sideways, cautious. It was rare for anyone to sit next to her. Rarer still for anyone to care. "Do you need anything?" he asked softly. She shook her head. "No. One ever asks me that." "I'm asking now," he said. She gave a weak smile. "Some coffee would be nice." He nodded and stood up, walking toward a nearby cafe. The woman's eyes followed him, unsure whether he'd come back. Most people did in single quotes T. 15 minutes passed, then 20. Just as she was about to lose hope. He returned, holding 2 paper cups. He handed her one and sat back down. "Thank you," she whispered. "What's your name?" He asked. "They used to call me Ellie." "Ellie," he repeated. "That's a beautiful name." She looked at him again, closer this time. There was something familiar about his face, even though it was partially hidden beneath the hoodie. "You look like someone," she said. He smiled faintly. "I get that sometimes." For a while they sat in silence, drinking coffee while the rain slowed to a light drizzle. Ellie clutched the photograph in her hand. The man noticed. "Who's that?" he asked. She looked down. "My son. He never came back from the war." There was pain in her voice, not just sadness, but something deeper. Like a wound that had never closed. "He was all I had," she said. "After he left, I lost everything." "I'm sorry," the man said. Gently. She nodded. "I used to work. Had a home, friends. But when grief takes over, everything else disappears." He looked at her, silent. Respectful. Then, after a pause, he said, "You deserve more than this, Ellie." She smiled sadly. "I don't expect anything anymore." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. Inside was a name. Sundar Pichai. "Wait," she said slowly, her eyes narrowing. "You're not." He nodded. "Why are you here? Why would someone like you talk to someone like me?" He looked away, then back at her with a quiet seriousness. "Because once, someone helped me when I had nothing," he said. "And I never forgot." Her eyes filled with tears. But before she could say anything, a loud shout came from across the street. 2 young men, rough-looking and loud, were walking toward them. "Hey, lady," one of them called. "Give me your bag." Ellie froze. Sundar stood up. "Leave her alone," he said. The young man laughed. "What are you going to do, old man?" The other one lunged. Ellie screamed. A fist flew. A loud crash. And then everything went dark. Asterisk shadows from the past. Sound of the crash echoed across the street like thunder. People turned briefly, startled, but no one came to help. In a world where most walked with heads down and hearts guarded, compassion had become a quiet stranger. Ellie screamed again as the 2 young men lunged toward Sundar. She reached out, powerless, her voice cracking with fear and rage. But what happened next was not what anyone expected. Sundar didn't fight back with anger. He didn't run. Instead, he stood his ground with a calmness that seemed almost impossible. He held up his hands, not in surrender, but in peace. "You don't have to do this," he said quietly, looking straight into the eyes of the taller man, who had raised a fist. The man hesitated. There was something in Sundar's voice, something that reached past anger and fear. It was the kind of voice that reminded you of who you used to be before the world hardened your heart. For a brief moment, the young man looked confused. Then, embarrassed. His friend, however, wasn't moved. He shoved Sundar hard, sending him stumbling back toward the bench. Ellie gasped. Her old bones moved on instinct, trying to shield Sundar with her frail body. But he stopped her gently, steadying himself again. Then, from across the street, a shout rang out. "Hey, leave them alone." A tall man in a dark jacket began running. Toward them, behind him, a barista from the coffee shop followed, pulling out a phone. "I'm calling the cops," she yelled. The two attackers froze. The tension broke like a snapped wire. The taller man turned and ran. The second hesitated a second longer, then followed, vanishing into the alleys beyond the square. Silence returned. It was broken only by the trembling in Ellie's breath and the slow patter of rain dripping from a rusted bus sign overhead. The man in the dark jacket approached. "You all right?" He asked. Sundar nodded, brushing off his coat. Ellie sat down slowly, her hand shaking. "You should go," she whispered to Sundar. "You don't belong here. People like you, they have things to protect." Sundar looked at her, his face soft with concern. "And what about people like you?" She gave a bitter laugh. "People like me get forgotten." He sat beside her again, ignoring the stares from the few people who had stopped to watch. "Ellie," he said quietly, "I think we forget the wrong people." The words hung in the air. They weren't grand. They weren't loud, but they struck something deep in her. Tears welled up again, though she tried to hide them. The barista approached with a blanket and a bag of pastries. "For you," she said, handing them to Ellie. Ellie blinked. "Why?" The barista shrugged. "Because you matter." The woman left before Ellie could respond. For a moment, Ellie just stared at the blanket in her hands, unsure of what to feel. It had been so long since anyone had offered her anything without expecting something in return. "What do you really want from me?" She asked Sundar quietly, not looking at him. He shook his head. "Nothing. I only want to listen. Maybe understand." Ellie looked away. "You won't understand. Try me." She hesitated. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she began. "I joined the army when I was 21, she said. "Everyone said women like me didn't belong there. I wanted to prove them wrong. I served 2 tours. I was strong then. I used to think I was invincible." Her hands curled tightly around the photo again. "My son was born when I came home. The second time, his name was Joshua. Sweetest boy you'd ever meet. Smart, kind, always asked me why people slept on the streets. I used to tell him, sometimes life's unfair, baby. But we help when we can." Her voice cracked. "Grew up fast. Too fast. When he turned 18, he enlisted. Said he wanted to follow in my footsteps." She paused, swallowing hard, but he never came back. Roadside bomb. They sent a letter, a flag, and a medal in a wooden box. Sundar was silent. Not out of awkwardness, but respect. After that, Ellie continued. "I couldn't work. Couldn't eat. I stopped talking to people. Lost the house. Lost everything. Just wandered until I ended up here. And now ... I'm just someone people step around." Sundar looked at her with eyes full of something deeper than sympathy. He saw her, truly saw her, not just the worn coat or the weathered skin, but the pain and strength that lived inside her story. "Ellie," he said softly, "your son was a hero. And you still are." She shook her head. "I'm nothing." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small pin. A simple symbol. It was a replica of the one he wore on his jacket the first time he entered Google's campus as CEO. "Meant everything to me," he said, placing it gently in her hand. "But right now, I think you need it more than I do." Ellie looked down at it, unsure of what to say. No one had ever given her something so personal. Something with meaning. Not in years. Suddenly, her body shuddered, not from the cold, but from a wave of emotion rising up. Too large to hold back, she clutched the pin to her chest, sobbing quietly. Sundar sat with her, letting the silence speak louder than words. But just as the tears slowed, a loud horn blared from a car nearby. A sleek black vehicle pulled up. A man stepped out wearing a sharp suit. He walked over quickly, eyes focused on Sundar. "Sir," the man said urgently. "Your meeting. We have to go now." Sundar stood, glancing back at Ellie. "Will you be okay?" He asked. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. for seeing me, he smiled softly. I'll be back, he said. I promise. And with that, he turned and walked toward the car. Ellie watched him disappear into the vehicle, still holding the pin tightly. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not pitied, not shamed, but truly recognized as someone who mattered. But just as the car disappeared into traffic, Ellie looked down and noticed something tucked under the coffee cup. Sundar had left behind a folded note. She opened it slowly, her hands trembling. Inside were 7 words that would change everything. Come find me. Your story's not over. Her heart stopped. Tears returned. But this time, they weren't only from pain. They were from something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. Asterisk echoes beneath the surface. Rain had stopped, but the wind carried a chill that seemed to move through the bones, not just the skin. Ellie sat on the bench long after Sundar's car disappeared, the note resting gently in her lap, the 7 words still echoing in her mind like a quiet storm. Come find me. Your story's not over. Asterisk. She stared at them again and again, as if they might change with each reading. Her fingers traced the edges of the paper, delicate and unsure. It had been years since anyone believed she even had a story left to tell. Years since she had seen herself as anything more than a shadow beneath the city skyline. And yet, here she was, holding a message from a man the world called a genius, a billionaire, a leader of one of the most powerful companies in history. But none of that had mattered to him when he spoke to her, when he listened, when he gave her something far more valuable than money or fame. And his kindness. Ellie stood slowly. Her knees ached. Her feet were stiff from sitting too long in the cold, but something in her chest had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't sudden. But it was there. She wasn't walking to survive anymore. She was walking toward something. The first stop was the library 2 blocks down, a place she hadn't dared enter in over a year. The librarian looked up in surprise when she walked in, wrapped in her worn coat, hair tangled from days in the open air. Can I help you? The librarian asked gently. Ellie hesitated. She wasn't used to asking for anything, but today felt different. I need to look up a name, she said. Sundar. Pichai. The librarian smiled. Of course, right this way. She led Ellie to a computer station, then gave her space. The machine whirred to life as Ellie's trembling fingers moved across the keyboard. Her eyes scanned the screen, overwhelmed by page after page filled with headlines, interviews, and photographs. Google CEO builds future from humble beginnings. Quiet strength of Sundar Pichai from Chennai to Silicon Valley. A story of resilience. She clicked one article, then another and another. The more she read, the more she saw it. His story was built not on arrogance or greed, but on struggle, sacrifice, and a deep understanding of what it meant to go unnoticed. He had grown up in a modest apartment in India, shared one room with his parents and brother, studied by the flickering light of kerosene lamps. He had stood in long lines for a phone call, shared textbooks, dreamed big while living small. She leaned back in the chair, letting the words settle into her heart. Maybe he really did understand. She pulled out the note again, stared at it one more time. Come find me? Your story is not over. Below those words, now that she looked closer, was a second line smaller. Written in tiny, careful handwriting. Ask for Marcus at the 5th Street shelter. He'll know what to do. She blinked. 5th Street. That was halfway across the city. She didn't have a car. Didn't even have a proper pair of shoes. But none of that mattered now. Ellie stood up, thanked the librarian, and stepped out into the city. Her steps were slow at first. She hadn't walked that far in a long time. Her body ached with every block. Her shoulders curled under the weight of years of surviving instead of living. But with each step, something in her posture shifted. By the time she reached the halfway point, the sun had broken through the clouds. Light fell through the buildings, casting long shadows across the pavement. She passed a group of teenagers on the corner. One of them tossed a joke in her direction, laughing as if she couldn't hear. She didn't flinch. She kept walking. 15 blocks later, She saw the sign 5th Street Community Shelter, peeling paint, broken windows, a sagging fence. But to Ellie, it looked like a door she never thought would open again. Inside, the air was warm. The scent of soup and old paper filled the space. Volunteers moved between cots and folding chairs. Conversations buzzed like static in the background. She approached the front desk, where a man with a thick beard and tired eyes looked up. "Can I help you?" he asked. "I'm looking for Marcus," she said. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "You're Ellie?" he asked. She blinked. "How do you know my name?" He smiled softly. "He told me to expect you." Marcus led her to a back room. It was quiet there, lined with shelves and boxes. A small desk sat in the corner, piled with papers and folders. He pulled out a chair and motioned for her to sit. "Sundar told me about you," he said, sitting across from her. "He said you were someone worth helping. Said you had a story no one's heard yet." Ellie shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know what he sees in me." "You don't have to," Marcus said. "He sees it. And sometimes that's enough to get started." He handed her a manila envelope. Inside were 3 things: a prepaid phone, a set of keys, and a folded letter. She opened the letter slowly. "Ellie, I meant it when I said your story isn't over. I've arranged a place for you to stay for now, a small room, clean, warm, quiet. The address is on the phone. There will be people there who care, and jobs available when you're ready. You don't owe me anything, but if you're willing, I'd like you to speak with a group of students I'm mentoring. They need to hear voices like yours, voices of resilience, of service, of humanity. If you say no, that's okay. But if you say yes, I'll be there." Listening. With deep respect, Sundarelli folded the letter with trembling hands. No one had written her a letter in years. No one had asked her to speak, to be heard, to matter. Her voice cracked as she spoke. "What if I'm not strong enough?" Marcus leaned forward, eyes steady. "You made it here. That tells me you already are." Ellie nodded slowly. Tears welled in her eyes again, but they were different this time. Not only pain, not only grief, but something gentler, something like healing. She left the shelter that night, not as a ghost, but as a woman walking back into the world. But what she didn't know, what no one knew yet, was that someone had been watching from across the street. A woman with short gray hair and sharp eyes. She lowered a pair of binoculars and muttered into a small radio. Subject made contact. "She has the phone. We move forward." A clicked. A pause. Then a voice replied. "Understood. Continue tracking. Phase 2 begins now." Asterisk, the quiet before the storm. Ellie didn't sleep much that first night. The room was small, but clean. A single bed with warm sheets. A window that overlooked a courtyard where a few potted plants swayed gently in the breeze. The silence was what felt strangest. After so many years listening to traffic, sirens, shouting, and the harsh rhythms of the street, the stillness was almost too much. Her body lay curled on the bed, but her mind wandered. Her fingers clutched the small phone Sundar had given her, the screen dark, untouched. She hadn't turned it on yet. Maybe part of her still didn't believe any of this was real. Maybe part of her feared that once she did, it would all disappear. At some point, she dozed off. When she woke, the morning light poured across the floor like a slow, golden tide. She sat up slowly, rubbing the stiffness from her legs, and looked around. Again, it wasn't much, but it was hers. For now, she stood and walked toward the mirror by the bathroom sink. For a moment, she didn't recognize the woman staring back at her. Tired eyes, sunken cheeks, hair grayer than she remembered. But there was something else too. A quiet strength behind the weariness. A spark that hadn't fully gone out. After a quick shower, her first reel, 1 in months, she sat on the edge of the bed and turned on the phone. The screen lit up, and a message appeared instantly. "Good morning, Ellie. We're glad you're here. Tap this address when you're ready to visit the student center. We'll take care of the ride." Her thumb hovered over the screen. These weren't just students, she reminded herself. These were the next generation of thinkers, builders, The kind of kids who grew up watching TED Talks and coding apps. What could someone like her possibly offer them? But she remembered Sundar's letter. They need to hear voices like yours. So she tapped the address. Within 10 minutes. A small electric car pulled up outside the shelter. A young man with glasses stepped out, holding a clipboard. You must be Ellie, he said with a nervous smile. She nodded. My name's Jamal. I'm part of Sundar's community team. We've been excited to meet you. The words felt strange. Excited to meet her? She wasn't used to that. Still, she climbed in, her heart pounding a little faster than before. Ride through the city was quiet. Outside, the building seemed taller than she remembered. The streets cleaner. She realized how long she had been on the margins of this place. How little of it she'd really seen in recent years. They arrived at a low-rise building with wide glass windows. The sign above the door read Future Forum in simple letters. Inside, students of all ages, some still teenagers, others in their early 20s, moved between rooms filled with screens, books, and projects. Jamal led her into a small auditorium where about 40 students waited. As Ellie stepped in. The room went still. She stood there, suddenly unsure. Her feet froze. Her hands gripped the note in her coat pocket. Jamal leaned close. Just tell your story, he whispered. They'll listen. She walked slowly to the center where a single chair sat under a warm spotlight. She sat, cleared her throat, and began. My name is Ellie, she said softly. I served in the military for over a decade. When I came home, I raised a son. His name was Joshua. He joined the army when he turned 18, and he never came back. The room didn't make a sound. I lost my son, and with him, I lost myself. I stopped living. I stopped fighting. For a long time, I thought I was finished. Asterisk, she paused, swallowing hard. But someone sat down beside me when no one else would. Someone reminded me that just because life breaks you down doesn't mean you have to stay broken. She looked up at the room. The students were leaning forward, eyes wide, breath held. I don't have all the answers. I'm not rich. I'm not famous, but I know pain. I know survival. And I know that kindness, real kindness, can change everything. When she finished, a girl in the front row wiped her eyes. A boy in the back clapped first. Soon, the entire room followed. The applause wasn't loud. It was deep. After the talk, dozens of students approached her. Some wanted to thank her. Others wanted to ask questions. One boy simply hugged her and whispered, my brother didn't come back either. For the first time in years, Ellie felt something she hadn't even realized she was missing. Purpose. Jamal escorted her to a small lounge afterward, where tea and sandwiches waited. While she sat there, sipping quietly, he returned with someone unexpected. Sundar. He entered without fanfare, dressed simply, carrying a small notebook. You did something powerful today, he said, sitting beside her. Ellie looked down. I wasn't sure I could, but you did. They sat in silence for a while. She glanced at him. Why me? He smiled. Because you reminded me of my mother, he said. She didn't go to college and didn't speak perfect English. But she worked every day, helped everyone around her, and never asked for credit. He paused. People like you are. Everywhere, but no one listens. She nodded slowly, the words settling deep. Then, a knock at the door interrupted them. Jamal opened it and stepped back. Surprised. A woman in a black coat stood there, holding a folder. She was tall, gray-haired, sharp-eyed. Ellie stared. Something about her seemed familiar. Can I help you? Jamal asked. The woman didn't answer him. Instead, she walked straight up to Ellie. You're Ellie, she said. Yes, Ellie replied cautiously. The woman opened the folder and laid a photograph on the table. It was a grainy black and white photo of a younger Ellie, standing beside a group of soldiers. Her arm was around a tall, quiet-looking man with soft eyes and a crooked smile. Do you remember him? The woman asked. Ellie nodded, her breath catching. That's David. We served together. He died in Iraq. The woman stared at her for a moment, then said something that made Ellie's world shift under her feet. He didn't die. He disappeared. And we believe he was trying to protect something dangerous. And now we think you may be the only one who can find it. The room went quiet. Sundar sat up straighter. Ellie leaned forward. What are you talking about? She asked. The woman took a deep breath. I work with a part of the government that doesn't officially exist. We've been watching you since the moment you met with Sundar. And we believe your past isn't just your past. She pulled out a sealed envelope. Someone left this for you. A long time ago. We just found it. Ellie opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single line written in her old unit's code. They lied about everything. Follow the signal. Trust no one. Asterisk, buried codes and broken trusts. Envelope trembled in Ellie's hands. Her eyes moved slowly over the words, but her mind struggled to keep pace. Each letter hit her like the cold shock of water on skin. It wasn't just a message. It was a rupture in the foundation of everything she thought she knew. They lied about everything. Follow the signal. Trust no one. She stared at the note for what felt like minutes, her fingers tightening around the edges. The world around her blurred. Voices faded. The clean walls of the student center, the warm scent of tea in the air, Sundar's steady presence beside her, it all faded behind the roar of memory. The woman in the black coat leaned forward. Her voice low, direct. We believe your friend David never died in that ambush. His records were erased, and someone inside your unit may have helped cover it up. Ellie shook her head slowly, her breath shallow. That's not possible. I was there. I saw the blast. They told you what they wanted you to believe. The woman interrupted. We've spent years following pieces of this trail. Recently, we intercepted a signal, encrypted, buried in a dormant satellite feed. We traced the encryption key to an old field training code, one that belonged only to a very specific group of soldiers. Your group. Sundar stayed silent beside her, listening intently. His eyes weren't filled with fear or doubt. They were searching, calculating, protecting. Ellie spoke quietly. Why come to me now? Because the signal activated 3 nights ago, right after your encounter with Sundar. We believe someone is trying to reach you, and we're not the only ones listening. Ellie's hands dropped to her lap, the note still clutched in her palm. The words rolled in her mind like thunder in the distance. Follow the signal. Trust no one. What does the signal say? She asked. We don't know. Not yet. It's locked behind a voice authentication cipher. The woman opened her briefcase and pulled out a small device. It was no larger than a paperback book. Its screen dim, its casing scratched. We believe this device is connected to what David was protecting. It responds only to a specific voice print. We want you to try. Sundar shifted slightly. Is she safe doing this? The woman looked at him carefully. Safe is a relative term, Mr. Pichai. We believe she's the only one who can do this. That makes her valuable. And when someone becomes valuable, they also become ... visible. Ellie looked at Sundar, her voice quiet. What if I don't want to go back to that world? He nodded slowly. Then you don't have to. No one should force you. But maybe this is why you survived. Not to forget the past, but to finally face it. She took a breath. A long, heavy breath. Then she reached for the device. Woman pressed a button. A tone played. The screen lit up with a blinking prompt. Voice pattern required. Begin authentication. Ellie leaned forward. Her voice was steady but low. Ellie Morris, Staff Sergeant, Unit Bravo 57. Authorization Delta Echo Sierra. A pause. The screen flashed once. Then again, a moment later, a distorted voice played through the speaker. Static, then a familiar tone, one she hadn't heard in decades. Gubble quotes Ellie. If you're hearing this, it means they found me. I couldn't run any longer, but I had to try. What we uncovered, it goes beyond the war, beyond everything they trained us for. You need to follow the map. It's in the notebook. You remember the one? Ellie's breath hitched. She remembered an old beaten field notebook. Spiral bound, its pages yellowed. It had been her journal during her second tour. She'd scribbled notes in it, messages for Joshua, coordinates, half-written letters. When the blast happened, the one that supposedly killed David, it was buried in the rubble of her tent. She thought it lost. But 3 weeks later, it had shown up in her duffel back in the States. She never questioned it until now. Still have it, she whispered. At the shelter, under my cot. Wrapped in plastic. We need it, the woman said. Immediately. Sundar stood. We'll get it. I'll come with her. The woman nodded, but something unreadable flashed in her eyes. She pulled out a card and handed it to Ellie. If you change your mind, call me. The agency doesn't know I've contacted you yet. For now, you still have time. And then, as quickly as she had appeared, the woman was gone. Jamal returned moments later, offering to arrange transportation. But Sundar shook his head. No drivers, just us. They left quietly, exiting through a back hallway. The sky had turned gray again, low clouds pressing down on the streets like a warning. They walked through alleys and side roads, avoiding the main avenues. Sundar moved with quiet alertness, scanning corners. Glancing over shoulders, as they neared the shelter, Ellie spoke. You think this is real? All of it? He nodded. I think something important is happening. And I think someone doesn't want you to remember. They arrived at the shelter and climbed the narrow stairs to her room. She moved quickly, digging beneath the cot, pulling out a thin package wrapped in layers of plastic. Inside, the old notebook waited bent, weathered, stained by time, but intact. She flipped through the pages, breath-catching. As she reached the middle, there it was, a torn page with numbers scrawled in red ink. Not coordinates, not words. Just a strange pattern, boxes, arrows, and a phrase written across the bottom. It's not about the war. It's about what we were guarding. Before she could speak, a sound interrupted her thoughts. A soft click. Then the low creak of a floorboard outside. Her door. Sundar turned, stepping silently to the edge of the room. He pulled the door open fast. No one was there. Just the empty hallway. But something was wrong. Taped to the outside of the door was a single photo. A grainy surveillance image. It was of Ellie and Sundar sitting together at the student center. Written across it in black marker were two words. Stop digging. They stared at it in silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Ellie looked at Sundar. We're not stopping, she said. No, he agreed. We're just getting started. Asterisk the signal in the silence. He stared at the photograph in stunned silence. The message written black marker felt heavier than any threat Ellie had faced in the battlefield. Stop digging, but it was already too late for that. The pass had cracked open, and what lay beneath wasn't just a forgotten piece of military history. It was personal, layered, something that touched both her grief and her purpose in ways she hadn't yet fully understood. Sundar turned the photo over. Nothing on the back, no address, no signature, just silence where answers should have been. Asterisk.